In the Netherlands, the justice system places a strong emphasis on rehabilitation. Even offenders with serious records, violent assaults, sexual crimes, repeat offenses, are often given second, third, even fourth chances. The belief is simple. With structure and support, people can change. But when those chances are handed out without proper oversight, the consequences can be irreversible. Anne Faber was 25 years old, warm, independent, full of life. She loved cycling through the countryside, spending time with friends, cooking simple meals. On September 29, 2017, she set out on a bike ride in the rain and sent her boyfriend a final selfie, a quiet snapshot of a typical Dutch road wet from drizzle, framed by gray skies. She had no idea she was heading toward danger. Just a few kilometers away in the town of Den Dolder lived Michael P., a man with a long criminal history, including the sexual aggression of 2 teenage girls and multiple violent robberies. He was serving a sentence under a forensic psychiatric program designed to reintegrate high-risk offenders back into society. As part of this, he was granted limited freedoms, like going to college for evening gardening classes. What no one at the school knew was that he had refused psychological evaluation, and as a result, authorities weren't allowed to share the full extent of his criminal background. Despite his past and despite red flags, he was out, and he was unsupervised. Like many others before him, Michael P. had been given opportunities, and like too many before him, he used that freedom to do something far worse. Anne grew up in Utrecht with close friends and family around. She'd taken pleasure in simple joys, the kind of pursuits most 25-year-olds relish. There's no evidence of instability in her past, only kindness, ambition, groundedness. Michael's early life is less publicly documented, but by the time of the incident, he was living under forensic care in a clinic, ostensibly undergoing treatment for aggression and substance abuse, but not for sexual deviance. That omission would later be scrutinized harshly. Anne's decision to take that rainy ride was unremarkable. She might have been decompressing, exploring new paths beyond the city, nothing more. Michael's presence on those same pathways, his temporary freedom, his anonymity within the system, was also unremarkable in isolation. But as these trajectories brushed against each other in the woods outside Den Dolder, something unthinkable lay in wait. The calm of that September day, the quiet of the forest trails, the soft drizzle and Anne's solitary ride, they all felt benign. Yet beneath the surface, the threads of 2 lives were converging. Anne, with her warmth and promise, Michael, with his dangerous past and misguided reintegration. Tension builds not in dramatic confrontation, but in the growing unease. How had the system let his freedoms outpace the monitoring? How could someone with his record go unsuspected, even by his own caregivers? And why had no one anticipated the possible consequences? As the sun set on September 29, 2017, neither Anne nor her loved ones could have predicted the coming weeks would unravel into tragedy. The peaceful Dutch woods, once serene and quiet, would soon become crime scenes and headlines. But for now, we hold back the worst. We feel only the gathering storm. Anne was the kind of person who kept moving. She loved cycling through nature, even when the weather was far from ideal. On September 29, 2017, she set off from Utrecht for a solo ride through the woods near Sept and Den Dolder, her route passing through rural trails, patches of forest, and quiet back roads. The wind picked up, rain poured down, and somewhere along the way, she disappeared. That final selfie she sent her boyfriend around 5 p.m. would be the last anyone heard from her. At first, it seemed like a simple case of bad weather or a flat tire. But when Anne didn't return home, her family raised the alarm. What followed was one of the most extensive missing person searches the Netherlands had seen in years. Hundreds of volunteers joined the effort, and soon items began to turn up. Her jacket was found in Westerheide, with DNA traces that linked to a man whose name stirred instant alarm in law enforcement databases, Michael P. At the time, Michael P. was in a reintegration program at the Utrecht Forensic Psychiatric Clinic in Den Dolder. This wasn't some halfway house for petty offenders. It was a facility meant for high-risk individuals. P. had been serving a sentence for the brutal sexual abuse of 2 teenage girls, along with a history of violent robberies. Despite this, he had refused psychiatric evaluation, and under a legal loophole, this meant that information about his past could not be shared with outside institutions. So while he was taking evening classes in horticulture, no one supervising him knew just who he really was. 10 days after Anne vanished, on October 9th, police arrested Michael P. He initially denied everything, but the DNA evidence was damning, and eventually he confessed, not in full, but enough to lead police to the site where he had hidden Anne's body. On October 12th, after days of coordinated searching in the forest near Zeewold, Anne Faber's remains were recovered. She had been sexually abused and murdered, though details of exactly when and how remained tightly guarded by the authorities out of respect for her family. What investigators were able to piece together was disturbing. After crossing paths with Anne, likely in the woods, Michael P. forced her into his control. He then transported her, possibly using her own rain gear and bike to mislead search efforts. Her bike, later discovered, had been deliberately hidden. Her phone was found discarded, and her body was buried in an isolated nature reserve, carefully concealed. In court, prosecutors described P.S. actions as deeply manipulative and cold. The defense argued that he hadn't planned the act in advance, and psychological reports, limited though they were, suggested a lack of emotional empathy but full cognitive awareness of what he was doing, though a full profile was never completed due to P.N.'s refusal to cooperate. What made this case especially tragic was not just what happened to Anne, but how preventable it was. The forensic care system failed. P. had already committed horrific crimes, yet due to gaps in legal oversight, he was out, unsupervised, and essentially invisible to the very people meant to be monitoring him. His freedom was built on the idea of reintegration. Anne's death became the cost of that misplaced trust. The arrest of Michael P. brought a swift and brutal end to the desperate hope that Anne might still be alive. Her disappearance had gripped the entire country. Strangers combed the forests, lit candles, and clung to the idea that she was simply lost. But when P. led police to her body in Zeewolde, the nation's grief quickly turned into outrage. The police investigation had moved fast. Once Anne's coat was found and DNA was matched to Michael P., investigators zeroed in on him. He was arrested on October 9, 2017, and under interrogation, he confessed. He initially claimed that the killing was not planned, but the calculated steps he took after the crime, hiding the body, discarding evidence, misleading investigators, told a different story. His confession was partial and contradictory, but it was enough to piece together the timeline and recover Anne's body. The case immediately raised questions. How had someone with his criminal record, 2 violent sexual aggressions and multiple assaults, been allowed supervised freedom in a psychiatric clinic? And more alarmingly, how could it be that the professionals around him didn't even know what he had done in the past? Digging deeper, the Dutch Safety Board uncovered a trail of systemic failures. Michael P. had refused to undergo psychological evaluation while in prison, a loophole that, under privacy laws at the time, meant his psychiatric background and risk profile couldn't be shared with the forensic clinic or the school where he was attending classes. This meant he could blend into daily life, appearing as just another patient in rehabilitation, while his full criminal history remained sealed. The public reaction was swift and furious. Protests broke out, media outlets ran daily updates, and government officials were forced to respond. Anne's parents spoke out powerfully, calling for justice, not just for their daughter, but for future victims. They demanded changes in how violent offenders are evaluated, monitored, and reintegrated. In July 2018, Michael P. was sentenced to 28 years in prison, followed by TBS, turbus-kicking stelling, compulsory psychiatric treatment. The court ruled that although he refused full evaluation, he was mentally competent at the time of the crime and fully aware of his actions. His lack of remorse, his attempts to cover his tracks, and his unwillingness to cooperate with investigators weighed heavily in the judgment. In 2019, the appeals court upheld the sentence, reaffirming the combination of a long prison term and psychiatric treatment as necessary. The ruling underscored a deep concern that Michael P. remained a danger to society and that any potential reintegration must be approached with extreme caution. The Faber case triggered immediate political consequences. The Dutch government initiated reforms in the forensic psychiatric system. A key change was the introduction of stricter rules allowing professionals to share crucial risk information, even when offenders refused to cooperate with psychological assessments. The goal was clear. Never again should someone like Michael P. slip through the cracks. But for Anne's family, no sentence and no reform could undo what happened. They spoke of Anne as someone full of life, joy, and kindness, someone who simply went for a bike ride and never came back. Her death became a symbol of a system that had trusted the wrong person, and a quiet reminder of the price of that trust.